So in our home, we're gearing up for summer. That means we're prepping our summer bucket list. That's trips to the ice cream shop and ventures to the beach and the different things that come with summer, baseball games and going to volleyball camps. It's just a lot that goes on. And sometimes I do this, and I think we do this as a family to help keep our kids busy, to help them not be bored, to, in some ways, kind of engage their mental health during the summer months, that they don't have free time in some capacities to maybe be sad or think about other things. Is that the best approach to summer? Well, today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Face in the Dark, we're going to look at this. What do we look at and look for in summer, especially with boredom kind of around the corner? Before we jump into some insights from Dr. Kathy, I want to let you know that this program is brought to you by Summit Ministries. Summit Ministries is a 2-week summer camp that's a deep dive into Christian worldview. It does a lot of the things that we're looking at with this episode on the summer months. It helps our kids have space and time to think and process deep things about life and maybe get some of their big questions answered. They do camps in Manitou Springs, Colorado, and Lookout Mountain, Georgia. They're dynamic, and I'd really encourage you to check them out. You can do that by going to summitministries.org/celebrate kids. That's summitministries.org/celebrate kids. But for now, let's turn to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, some Hollywood notables are working to bring boredom back. Specifically, Eva Mendes. She's gearing up for what she's calling a summer of boredom. She's a 48-year-old actress, for those who might not know, and she opened up recently about the importance for her daughters to embrace stillness. And it's something that she was exploring after a trip to London with her partner Ryan Gosling, where he was filming in the spring. She says this, quote, "When we were in London, we went from musical to musical, taking advantage of being back in the theater. We went to all kinds of museums. We went to Windsor Castle. I had a ton of field trips planned for my daughters." But she goes on to say, quote, "And now I feel like it's time to bring boredom back. I'm bringing boredom back, especially for my kids, but for myself as well." She goes on to add that she really feels that when we're bored, we're not stimulated by a phone or an iPad or a computer. And that's when ideas come in. Sometimes it's fun ideas. Sometimes she says dangerous ideas, sometimes enlightening ideas. But she really wants this summer to be a summer of boredom in her home. Now, I appreciate where Mendes is coming from, but it must be pretty hard to reference a trip to Europe in your pursuit of boredom today. That dynamic is incredible, and it's not something I can really relate to. But I want to say, in all seriousness, why should parents join Mendes in this pursuit of boredom this summer?
Yeah, I love this. Why should we do it? Because she's right. It's where creativity lives. It's where curiosity is allowed to flourish. And we all need quiet. Quiet restores the soul. Quiet is when we have the aha ideas so often, and we explore and we discover more about ourselves, right? When kids are, quote unquote, bored, meaning that mom and dad don't feed them everything to do. Here, now do this, now do this, now do this. But maybe there's a list of possibilities when you're bored. Here are some things you could consider doing. Maybe we do leave out, puzzles and games and Sudoku and crossword puzzle books and balls at the back door. So we invite them to entertain themselves, but they get to decide. They discover initiative. They discover interest. I think it builds identity. I think they observe more about what's going on in the home and through the window. I think it's so important. Wayne, boredom is a fact of life. And if we train children to believe they can avoid it, they're going to be in a world of hurt. They will be bored in relationships at times. They will be bored on the job at times. They'll be bored in school at times. And we don't want them to bail. If they are raised to believe that boredom means there's something wrong, they are really going to be in a world of hurt.
Dr. Kathy, I think that's really powerful for us to think through, especially as many of us might be gearing up for scheduling out our summer. We pack out our summer as parents, oftentimes so that our kids have a rhythm or some kind of discipline or habits now that school's not happening, we don't really want them to feel alone. And we might see that they might be struggling when their summer happens and they're not with their friends every day. And we can kind of want to step in and help out and really pack out their summer. Why is that maybe a challenged move or a bad move, or maybe it's a good move for parents as we prepare this summer? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's absolutely appropriate to have options and to have conversations with your kids. What are some things you would like to do this week? And then if it's a realistic thing that they could do, then you provide the way for that to happen. Maybe they would like to build with clay because they love that in an art class. And it's easy for you to either make a homemade Play-Doh or to go and purchase some clay. So have a conversation, I think, is helpful. If you know your kids, if you have studied your children and you know that there were things they really enjoyed this academic year, building a diorama box for a history project, then have a craft box and let them explore and make a little mess. Now, you set up a parameter there. You're allowed this corner of the dining room table, and you will be careful of, what mom and dad own. But that's part of the exploring of what I'm capable of, right? So giving options, asking if they have preferences, I think is super important. And going on field trips, going to the library, if the library is safe, walking the aisles of a Home Depot and of a Hobby Lobby and seeing what exploration happens and what ideas your kids come up with, exploring with relatives and neighbors what possibilities are, I think is really good. You don't want to be there everything because then they feel like they can't do anything without you, without either your suggestion or your approval. And although you might feel important in those moments, that's not about you feeling important. It's about raising up children who are healthy, like a dependent, independent, healthy balance there. And they discover what they enjoy and what they're capable of, and they set out to do it, and it develops so much of their character.
I like that, Dr. Kathy. I often think that the greatest push for us as parents comes really from that encouragement that we find inspiration outside of our four walls. As we think through this idea of how do I get to this place where I can do these things with my kids, to put them in a place where they're bored sometimes, or where they don't have to have the full summer schedule. They can have some of the summer schedule. We often find encouragement for that outside of our four walls, outside of our family, outside of our kids, and actually in our friends, because emotions and opinions inside of our home aren't really in short supply. When some of these things, these habits, these rhythms that we're looking to change, to have our kids be bored, it's not really something that they naturally have a muscle for oftentimes, and they're going to push back. Where would you encourage parents to go to find inspiration to push through the hard days of setting new habits of boredom, especially at home this summer?
We have to ask ourselves how we handle boredom. Do we run from it? Are we anxious in it? Do we regret having free time? So I think let's examine maybe our perspective toward these free time moments. I wonder if our parents are alive, if we could talk to them, like, how did they handle it when we were bored? Like, boredom back in the day, right, was so different because we didn't have a device in our pocket to immediately pick up and look at. So I wonder if our moms and dads would have some interesting ideas. What did they think we could do in our homes and with our kids that would be maybe the structure that we crave, but still give freedom to the kiddos? And again, I would mention there are experts in the community, the library, there are so many museums in our country. Many of them are free in the summers. And do you live in a community that offers tours of factories? I live where our money is made. I think it's one of two places in America where our paper money is created. And the tour is fascinating. And I would go back every other year because it's absolutely fascinating. Of course, you're surrounded by money, which is kind of fun. So are there things that we could do with our kids that would be something to do, but not all encompassing, not totally time consuming? And then it gives them so much to think about after the fact. And here's another idea. You might think this is nuts. Go to a hotel in your community and pick up every piece of literature at the front door. I was just in a relatively small town, and the hotel had probably 50 different brochures about things to do. Like, this community offered this, and there was a flower festival here. And I grabbed them, and my hostesses did not know about everything in their own community. So maybe you go to the local hotels and you pick up and you find out what's offered in your area, and you go and you have fun.
As Dr. Kathy was talking, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Psalm chapter 46. And I'm going to begin reading at verse 8. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations that he's brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. This verse is actually the senior verse for the graduating class at the school that my kids go to. It's a powerful passage that comes out of a time where the psalmist is really wrestling with the dynamics of what it means to be in a place that is full of trouble. And in this passage, God gives them direction. He says that in the midst of all of the turmoil and the trouble that you might see in the world or maybe even feel internally, that the call is really to be still and know that he's God, to be reminded of the things that God has done. When we take time to have boredom and stillness in our lives, and actually when we lead that for our kids, as Dr. Kathy kind of encouraged us here in this episode, we do a great service to them, helping them get a picture that the stillness or the peace of God is something that we can have in the middle of chaos, and maybe even the middle of internal chaos. That God can still reign and we can still be warring inside, but have stillness and peace that we know comes from God. As parents and as people that care for kids, when we lead in this way, that gives our kids a bright light that shines and cuts through some of the darkest times, especially times of boredom. Let's lead with boredom this summer as we look ahead to what we're planning. Maybe we need to book out some time for boredom time in our summer schedule. That'd be a dynamic way to kind of look at this podcast. You know, before we go, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by Summit Ministries. Summit Ministries is a fantastic ministry partner for us here at Celebrate Kids. Dr. Kathy's actually got a lot of speaking engagements where she's going to be visiting camps at Summit Ministries to give kids in high school and college some encouragement as they're facing different questions and big realities in their life. I want to encourage you to check Summit out, maybe for your kids or maybe something that you'd want to support down the road. You can do that by going to summitministries.org/celebrate kids. That's summitministries.org/celebrate kids. Thanks for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. My name is Wayne Stender. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, we're so glad that you're joining us this week. And I want to say I'm looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.